Hello again. Right, here's a bit of fun that you can have just with an everyday, ordinary piece of paper. Okay, something like this. This is one of my students' work here. Hopefully they don't mind me borrowing it. What I'd like you to do, if you have a piece of A4 paper, you can do the same as me. Start, please, by folding it in half. Either way, but I would advise that you fold it long ways. So then what you get is a smaller version of a piece of paper. If this is A4, this size is called A5. And then we can fold again. And this size of paper is called A6. Hopefully, maybe you knew that, maybe you didn't. What I would like you to do is to go on folding as many times as you can. I'm going to do the same while you do. Let's see where we get to. So hopefully if you're watching this, you're folding your piece of paper as many times as you can. Be extra careful. Make sure that you do it nice and tight. Starting to get tricky now. You might be starting to wonder how many times you can possibly do this. And I think I might have reached my limit. I think with a lot of force I'm gonna convince myself that this one counts. I'm counting it. I'm counting it. I have to hold it, but I'm counting it. Right, I'm going to unfold now and see how many folds I did. Maybe you could do the same. Right, I'm counting that one. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 folds. Now, if you did more than 7 folds out there, I'm extremely impressed, because you may have heard this. The legend goes that it's impossible. We always used to do this when I was in school, wasting time in the back of lessons, trying to fold a piece of paper, seeing how many times you could fold it in half. What I didn't realise is there's lots of great maths behind this. So hopefully a table is going to come up now, which shows you what happens when you start folding a piece of paper. So we have the starting thickness of a piece of paper, which is 0.05 millimeters. And then as we double, what happens is as you halve the length, when you fold it one way, what you're essentially doing is halving the length but keeping the width the same, but the thickness doubles. And then you halve the width but keep the length the same, but crucially the thickness doubles, and then you halve the other way again. Every time the thickness doubles, and on alternate goes, the length or the width halves. And what happens when you get down to the 8th fold, the paper would actually become thicker than it is wide or long, which hopefully you can imagine is impossible. So we can actually see, just with a little bit of maths, for years and years of my life, people used to spread this rumour, it's impossible, you can't do it. And all I had to do was a little bit of maths to realise that, yeah, it should be impossible. You shouldn't be able to fold any further. But I've always been slightly obsessed with these numbers that double and double and double, numbers that are doubling all the time. And one of the best known tales to do with doubling numbers, or powers of 2, is to do with a chessboard, which I've got here. This links back to an ancient story which probably comes from China, definitely Asia, which has a man performing a task for the king, and the king asks how the person wants their payment. And the king's willing to offer any money. And the man who's done the task says, I don't require any payment. All I require is 1 grain of rice on the first square, 2 grains of rice on the next square, 4 grains of rice on the next, 16 grains of rice, until the chessboard is full. And the emperor laughs and says, this man simply wants to be paid in rice. It's pauper's gold. There's no value in rice. The man's a fool, which you'd think until you try to actually do it. And this is my task for you to try. I hope you're up for it. Now, your teacher might have brought some rice in. There might be some actual rice for you to use. Here are some of the things that I would suggest you do. I mean, I've got some rice here. You can't see that. But if I put 1 grain of rice on the first square, and then I put 2 grains of rice on the next square, and then I put 4 grains of rice on the next square, this does get quite slow and tiresome. All right, this is not a great spectator sport. So what you might like to do instead is work out how many grains of rice you can get on a teaspoon. Now, it might be 16, it might be 32, it might be 64, I don't want to say. But if you can try and get as close as you can to one of those doubling numbers, then you know which square you could replace with a teaspoon. And do you know how many teaspoons are in a tablespoon? It's 3. Nah, it's rubbish, isn't it? That's useless, there's no use. If it was 2, then we could have 2 of those for 1 of those. But it's not, it's 3. So you don't want a spoon like this. But I did manage to find a spoon. I have a spoon that looks like this, which is 2 teaspoons. And this spoon says serial killer on it, because I love puns almost as much as I love maths and cereal. You might be able to find a spoon that's similar. And then we could say that 2 of these makes 1 of these. So we replace the next square with 1 of these. And then you might be able to work out how many teaspoons, or whatever this cereal spoon is, go into a bag of rice. So you might be able to get a bag of rice, maybe a 500-gram bag of rice from the shop, and work out maybe it's 4 scoops or 8 scoops or 16 scoops that fills up a bag. Try and go as close to one of those doubling numbers as you can. And once you've done a 500-gram bag, you might realise that 2 500-gram bags makes a kilogram bag. And maybe you could work out which square corresponds to the kilogram bag. And then the next square, of course, corresponds to the 2 kilogram bag, which looks like this. And after that, the next square corresponds to the 4 kilogram sack, which is empty, because I had a bit of a rice spillage incident at one of my previous gigs. They didn't like me very much for the clean-up after that. And then after the 4 kilogram sack, well, my good friend that works in a Chinese restaurant says that they go to these next. And this is a 15 kilogram sack. How disappointing. Obviously a mathematician didn't plan this. Anyway, maybe you can work out which square corresponds to a 16 kilogram sack. And then maybe you could work out how many of these sacks would fit inside your classroom. Maybe think about how many you could fit in long ways, width ways, and height ways towards the ceiling. And work out how many sacks would fill your classroom. Maybe then you could work out how many classrooms there are in the school. Which square would represent every classroom in your school being full of rice? Do you think there would be enough rice to fill your school on this chessboard? That's for you to investigate. And how about all the schools in the world? Enough rice for that? This is for you to investigate. I'm going to leave it to you now. You might need calculators, and you might need your teachers to help you out a little bit. But what could we do with all the rice on this chessboard if it was 1 grain, then 2, then 4, then 8, then 16? Over to you to have a think about. What did you find out then? How much rice? Which square would be enough to fill your entire school with rice? How about all the schools in the world? Which square? When I do this with audiences, we usually find that about 5 or 6 squares from the end is the entire output of rice, I should say, the entire world's output of rice in the last calculatable year. There is almost certainly not enough rice produced in the entire history of the Earth to fill this chessboard. It's quite an amazing thing, really. It's quite incredible when numbers start doubling and doubling and doubling, just how big they can get.